Let's go ahead and jump in since it is 12:05, and we'll just let people kind of filter in as they go. Some people will be joining us here on this Zoom. Some will be joining, as I mentioned, on Facebook Live. So as a couple of housekeeping things to get started, I will start with an introduction of myself. My name is Rebekah Farley, and I work at Boys and Girls Haven in our Development and Communication department. And I will give you a little bit more overview of who is here and what we're doing today here in just a moment. But again, in terms of housekeeping, we would ask that if you're joining here on the Zoom, that you would go ahead, keep your mute on so that we can maintain some order for our panelists here as they discuss. And I also wanted to note that if you do have questions, this is very conversation style. So if you've got questions or comments, please feel free to mention that in the chat box here on Zoom. And if you're over on Facebook Live, please utilize the comment section over there, and we'll do our best to keep an eye on that and pass those questions along to our panelists as they come up. So I wanted to go ahead and note that. I also wanted to let you know, if you're not able to hang on through the end of the webinar, we're going to have this uploaded. It will be available on Facebook via whatever agency, probably where you heard about this from. Boys and Girls Haven will have it live, as well as all of our partner agencies through the Kentucky Foster Care Coalition, including St. Joe's and Sunrise, Maryhurst, Home of the Innocents, Ramey Step. Oh man, see, I got into it now. I started naming them. Bellwood, Brookline, / oh, sorry, I'm letting people in at the same time. So wherever you heard about us, Children's Alliance, KYA, you'll be able to access our Facebook Live from those as well. And then we are going to upload it to YouTube as well. So we'll make sure to publish that information out when it is uploaded. So this is being recorded so we can access it later. And you can also share with your networks as well. So that's, I think, it for the housekeeping. To jump into it, I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview about, I mentioned the Kentucky Foster Care Coalition. That is a group of, we call ourselves sister agencies. It's private child care, foster care facilities here in Kentucky, across the state, who've joined together specifically during COVID-19 to help really amplify and raise the conversation around the foster care field during COVID-19. We're facing a twofold challenge here in Kentucky, that we have a child welfare crisis that's happening, and then COVID-19 is happening, and this field is disproportionately affected by COVID-19 as well. And so we are doing our best to give you the resources that you need to help advocate for us as well. So that's the goal here for these webinars, is that we would, as a coalition, we would be able to empower you to reach out within our community. And so today, that's what we're gonna do. As far as the coalition goes, again, it's just a bunch of sister agencies getting together and collaborating. Collaboration is more than a word to us. It's something that's absolutely essential right now. So thank you to everyone who took part in helping plan this webinar and get it together. Boys and Girls Haven is hosting the first webinar through our Facebook page, but we will have additional webinars coming out that will be hosted through some of our sister agencies as well, with a lot of collaboration, CEOs, and all of us just holding hands together to help tell the story and share with you guys how you can jump in. So all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our. In many cases, you may be familiar with these names and faces. We have three incredibly knowledgeable people to share with us today. The first of those is Grace Akers. She is with St. Joseph Children's Home here, headquartered here in Louisville. And while they're here in Louisville, they also serve kids that come from all over the state. And Grace, this is your second round, right? You already had a whole career with the Health and Family Services, with DCBS, and a long history of advocacy and relationships across the state and respect. And we thank you for bringing that reputation and advocacy history with you to the table.
Thank you.
Yep. And then next we have Sonja Gray, who is with the Exploited Children's Help Organization. We call that ECHO. It's a national organization, and Sonja is the executive director here in Kentucky. And again, she not only has a background in the nonprofit field, but from what I understand, also in the for-profit field, and a lot of community connections. If you saw her board experience, you would recognize a lot of those names. Sonja is an incredible advocate for young people through ECHO, but also in her personal advocacy and outreach for our neighbors and empower our communities. And so thank you, Sonja, for coming and bringing those advocacy efforts to the conversation as well. And last but not least, we have Dale Suttles, although he did not bring his puppet as was promised to me. That wasn't why we invited you on, so it's okay. Dale is the president of Sunrise Children's Services, another child caring agency, a part of our coalition along with St. Joe's foster care agencies. And Dale also has a background, not just at Sunrise, but with Big Brothers Big Sisters, a name we'd all recognize, again, a huge heart for kids, and also brings personal experience to the table, being an adoptive father himself. And so once again, thank you, all three of you, for joining us for this panel today. And we really appreciate you bringing your wisdom and experience to the table. You have to note it because it's Zoom and COVID-19. There is a dog crying somewhere in the room. I apologize if you, I think she hears me talking and she's like, are you talking to me? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I mentioned that this is a series. Today we're focusing on action steps for advocacy. And I keep using that word a lot for a reason, because we are going to ask you to do something before this call ends today. We have a very clear action step for you to take before you walk away from your tablet or your phone or your computer. We have a step that you can take right there where you're sitting or standing. Or laying, as the case may be, for those of you with your screens off there. We will make sure that call to action is really clear at the end. Once again, if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, you can watch it later. Feel free to fast forward straight to the end where the call to action is, and we'll give you those tools and make sure that's really, really clear for you. Once again, thank you all for coming along and helping us out. So to get started, Sonja, if you wouldn't mind, to help us out here with understanding the landscape of child welfare in Kentucky right now. Some of us are familiar with the headlines, right? We have #1 rate of child abuse and neglect in the country here in Kentucky. We just passed 10,000 kids in foster care. Can you share with us a little bit about why we are in the situation, or why does our region look the way that it does? What factors are playing into that? I think you got your mute on.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
All right. Let me give a little bit of background of ECHO, and then I'll go right into that question if you don't mind, Rebekah. Actually, we are not a statewide or a national organization. We are a grassroots organization right here in Louisville, Kentucky. And we've been in existence since 1983. Our mission is to prevent and reduce child abuse. So we are one of the organizations here in Louisville that goes into the school system and teaches the kids about child sexual prevention. So I've been with ECHO a little over 3 years, and you are correct. We have been #1 2 years in a row for having the highest child abuse case rates. We have the privilege of being in a building with Child Protective Services, so we have a very unique alignment with our partners here. So when you ask me this question, you know, it's a multifaceted question, which there's really not just one pinpoint answer. So there's a lot of different things that can contribute to why we have such a high rate in child abuse. One could be that we are doing an excellent job of reporting. That can be one factor as to why we're seeing the stats that we see as well. Although we do know that there are still several individuals that are not familiar or do not know that Kentucky is a mandatory reporting state. So we're going to give the highs first. The other contributing factors, you know, it can be systematic. It really depends from county to county, you know, from family court to civic court, how those cases are being looked at and justified as well. So, you know, there's a lot of what I would say different perceptions that can go into that as to why a child would be removed from the parents. One of the key components that I always talk about with our parents, and specifically with community leaders, is, you know, understand that when a child is being removed from the home, that is really the last resort. It is really about family unification, but also about the ultimate safety of that child. So, you know, once again, there's a lot of contributing facts as to why we have the highest rates, but there's not just one specific answer that I can give you. And I would love, you know, Dale or Grace, you know, jump in with that as well.
Hi, y'all. It's Grace, and I absolutely echo the comments that Sonja's saying about education of our communities tied to reporting. So just to kind of set context timeline-wise, there was really, particularly in the urban sites of Kentucky, so in Louisville and Lexington and those 3 urban counties in northern Kentucky, in 2014, there was really an explosion of reporting, and that was directly tied to community outreach and early on those urban sites and community education. That is really transformed across the state in the last 6 years with statewide education activities as well, and Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky is a huge leader in that. Of course, you all are well aware of Kentucky Youth Advocates and of course ECHO in Louisville. So the community was much more educated, and that to me is the great news. What we're seeing now in COVID is that there's been a pause on that, and early on in COVID, there was a 65% decrease, so in March and April, in reporting, 65% decrease. In Louisville, just by statistic, the average new reports coming in is about 2,000 in March and April, and into May it was about 300, directly tied to those community activists or those community reporters that we've done such a good job of educating healthcare providers, school, childcare. Those eyes weren't on kids. So we know that child abuse is still very prevalent. It's just not being reported right now. We'll start to see the uptick, I think, again. Mm-hmm. Childcare's open and well baby checks, et cetera. But there's been a significant decrease. It doesn't mean those families aren't still at risk.
And again, this question is open to you all. We've heard that there's this possibility of a spike, right? So we've had a record number of kids enter care in Kentucky, seen a decrease in referrals, and then there's potentially an anticipated spike. Do you all have any comments about where that might be coming from? I think you've hinted at it, Grace, a little bit there.
Yeah, I think, you know, when the schools really shut down, you know, in March, many of us that are probably on this call and, you know, to my allies on the panel, we went into a panic mode. Just as Grace mentioned, you know, most of the reporting is going to come from an outside entity as a school or a youth summer program or after school program. And when you do not have that opportunity for kids to engage with safe adults, then, you know, once again, they are being in an isolated situation. And here's the twofold. If the child has not been educated as well, then that child may not understand or know that that is incorrect behavior, and they may not have the knowledge of even being able to identify what a trusted or a safe adult is. So we were sending out information through our Facebook, you know, just trying to get the information out there about the education component, both to children and to adults as well. You know, asking neighbors, you know, please keep your eyes on these kids and understand these are some of the warning signs. Not that a child has been abused, but that is time to start a conversation. And so, as Grace mentioned, and I'm sure Dale's going to mention as well, you know, when these kids start getting back around adults and not in these isolated situations, the stories that may come from them being, you know, in the house for 3 months may be horrific. And so I think that many of us are preparing, you know, for what I would say is that aftermath of these kids being isolated. So having, you know, organizations that are here on the panel, but also making sure that we have mental health therapists available as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, guys, I talked to an attorney from Eastern Kentucky last night. It gave me a call who talks to some judges and so on, and so we know Eastern Kentucky sometimes can be behind. They're not there in the Northern Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville triangle as far as some of the reporting efforts goes. And he was talking about a real fear from some of these judges, some of these family judges, that by not having those eyes, by not having those teachers, those counselors and so on, they simply just don't know what's going on. And so which tells us if we have 65% less reporting in a couple of months, either we're doing something awfully well, or there's simply no eyes on these kids. And I think we all tend to believe the latter there, which means a call to action. We really need to be ready. We really need to talk to our legislators and senators and let them know. And I know Grace is probably going to talk a little bit about this, but it is imperative to let folks know, just because these numbers seem low doesn't mean that there's a problem. It is my gut feeling that we are going to have a problem, and we need to be prepared the best way we can. And this collaboration of excellent child care providers, it will be our responsibility to get the word out. And just like the political arena saying, get the vote out, we're seeing a lot of these changes. We have to do the same, and we need to be aggressive to talk to our folks and say, we're going to need resources, and we're going to be ready, but we're going to need some help.
Dale, and I'm going to put a little cap on that too. Not only do we need the resources, but we need the funding. And that's what we truly need to advocate for as well. We have a lot of programs, but some of our programs are operating on shoestring budgets. And if we're really going to try to make a difference and a change and really care about our kids in Kentucky, we got to have that funding to back up all of these organizations that are doing the good work. As Kentucky, we do not have any state law that mandates or requires any type of child prevention education. We're leaving our kids very vulnerable until an organization or a school or a teacher, takes that on as another task.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think we have the twofold task of caring for kids who are in the child welfare system and also preventing the flow of kids entering the foster care system, empowering families, and education is a huge piece of that. So thank you so much for making sure that we keep an emphasis on that. And again, from a legislative standpoint, that is also something we need to advocate for. But like you said, shoestring budgets, a challenging landscape in terms of resources. Dale, just to give us an overview as we head into that conversation, can you give us a quick overview of what funding looks like for foster care agencies specifically, like Sunrise or St. Joe's or Boys and Girls Haven, just so for the sake of our audience, what that landscape looks like and how the funding streams work?
Well, and we do know that there wasn't any significant funding increases in the latest budget that was put forth. And
you mean specific to child welfare?
That's right. And what we do know too is those of us that are in foster care, therapeutic foster care, foster to adopt, also because of COVID and because there are less referrals out there, it has put a strain on being able to just keep staff ready and working for that onslaught. And I think sometimes we don't talk about those things because we wish we didn't have to be here. We do. We wish that every child would have the family that they needed and so on. But we're here for that specific reason. And so there has been some inconsequential outcomes from this COVID-19 outbreak. And I've got, I've got a report on all of the agencies here and their capacity and where they're actually at. And so due to the referrals, I mean, folks are on that shoestring budget you were talking about, and probably worse than a shoestring budget. And so that is why it is vitally important that we we've had some of the CARES money that will help, and of course we need to apply for those things, but that is why it is important. This is a long-term problem, and it is something that we need to invest in on the federal level and on the state level. It is systemic. It is something that we need to grab a hold on and advocate for 20 some years so that we can change generations. And one of the things that people don't realize, and they don't talk about too, is that what we're trying to do is give children a good life, but a good future, a path of life, which means that if we do everything we need to do, it's like we used to do at Big Brothers Big Sisters, as we used to get mentors involved in academics and self-esteem and so on. Let's set them up so that they can become, and it sounds like a political term, taxpayers. They can, because there is not enough, part of the problem is there's not enough tax-paying money coming in to do the things. But here's what I would say. You pay for the things that are important. Education is important and child welfare is important. And so one of the biggest things we need to do is to invite our legislators and senators to the table. And I will also say this, it is all of us need to sort of expand that portfolio to go to companies that want to be on the cutting edge to make change and invite those companies to join us to change the lives of X number of kids over X number of years. And to do that as a coalition, as a group of providers that can challenge companies, because this is a problem. But we have the capability to do something about it here in Kentucky.
Yep, and thank you for saying that, Dale. We have the capability to do something about this. We're discussing these issues, and a lot of times the conversation stops at 10,000 kids in foster care. Oh my goodness, what do we do?
What do we do? Yeah.
Right. We have the capacity. We have an incredible field of social workers and administrators and foster parents and people on this call and on this Facebook Live that are ready and willing to help out. So Grace, I wanted to come to you. We've had some conversations. There's the two sides of funding at nonprofit agencies like we serve with. There's the federal funding side, which is going to be a big focus for us in this conversation today. And there's also the private dollars, as you mentioned, about foundations, the private donations that have also been affected by COVID-19. Could you give us a little info on that?
That's right. So, and there are so many people on the call that are so much more expert than I am. So you all feel free to chat or weigh in, but it is a public-private partnership for most of us that are doing this work of child welfare. And I absolutely believe in that partnership. We have a contract with the cabinet, as do many people on the call, with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, both in our foster care and our residential, and we count on that per diem and that partnership and that support. But we also have donors that want to know where their money goes, and they want to give to individual organizations. And that private component, not just with individual donors, but with foundations, has been critical for us. And we're all feeling these effects of two things. You know, we get the two-hit wonder. And I'm not talking about Christopher Cross, who wrote Sailing and another song I can't recall at this moment. I knew Dale would get it, and Sonja.
Ride like the wind.
Closer to my age. But, it's the loss of revenue. And we all have that story in one or more of our programs. So loss of revenue and the increased expenses due to COVID. And we're all still dealing with that. So it's not just this short term, these last 4 months, but that's going to continue. I mean, we're already projecting at St. Joe's, and I know others are doing the same thing, that continued projection of those two things, continued expense. We're in the middle of the surge right now, and St. Joe's at this point, and I'm knocking on my desk as I say it, have had no positives, but I do still believe that is a matter of when, not if. And most of our organizations will be dealing with it and already have at some point. And the loss of revenue, we have months and months of reduced revenue, particularly in our child care, and everybody's got that story and a story about their program. And continue to see that because there are fewer people here and fewer opportunities for us to be able to network. On the foundation side, early on, we're in the middle of a capital campaign. Maybe others are, but I'm sure that you've seen these you've seen this effect that foundations early on shifted their focus, and understandably so. They shifted it to COVID relief. And now, as we get into July, it's not just COVID relief that benefited organizations like St. Joe's early on, but it's organizations that don't have another means to income. So it's organizations that are more dependent on foundations and donors and don't have an independent income stream, i.e. the cabinet partnership. So, that puts that puts more stress on organizations like ours and like those of you who are on the call now. What we've done early on, and I'm sure that you all have done the same, is we've reached out to those foundations and we've reached out to our donors, and we've tried to stay really connected to the cabinet. Michelle's on the call. I see Michelle Sanborn, but really connected to the cabinet, connected to our local leaders. The mayor was here. Our mayor in Louisville was here about 3 weeks ago. We were just on a phone call with our councilman yesterday. Ours is Bill Hollander, for our area, because cities and states are gonna eventually be the hopefully if the bill will pass, be the beneficiary of more federal dollars. And it's all federal. In the end, all of this money and all this stimulus money, it starts at the federal level. And I don't want to spoil the call to action, which is going to be amazing, Rebekah.
No, not at all. Not at all. So to kind of summarize what you all have been saying, this is essentially the landscape is we already know there's been an escalating abuse and neglect crisis in Kentucky. Whether or not the referral numbers are showing it right now, the trend probably is not dropping off, despite the fact that we don't have eyes on these kids, right? So we know that there's going to be an expanded need for more resources as more children are entering, and to Sonja's point, more money towards prevention, so we can lead, essentially. So we have this crisis we're dealing with. We have COVID-19 that's impacting that, potentially increasing the amount of abuse as families are facing stressors in the home, et cetera, lack of community support and other things that help some of our families who are struggling. And so we're seeing this crisis right in front of our eyes. And at the same time, with COVID-19 affecting economic situation in Kentucky and across the country and the world, honestly, there's a potential that the funding streams that we've leaned on, there could be a decrease moving forward in terms of those private dollars. And so all around, we are looking for federal support. This is the community coming together and saying, we value our kids and we're gonna come together. And so Grace, could you tell us a little bit more? We've referenced it a couple of times. Can you reference that funding stream we are going to talk about today and our call to action, the COVID-19 relief funds?
Right. So it comes in a couple of different formats. And again, I'm looking at Michelle for a lifeline, calling a friend, Michelle Sanborn. But it's the stimulus bill that the House has passed and that is before the Senate. And in Kentucky, we get a twofer, right? And our senator, who's not only the Kentucky senator, McConnell, but he's also the majority leader. So he's responsible for two things. He's responsible for the content of the bill that includes a couple of things. And I think, Rebekah, you're going to be kind of popping this on a screen at some point. But it's a continuation or a second round of funding for PPP. And that loan, and those of you on the call who received that loan, for us, it was an absolute lifeline. Early on, we got those dollars. And early on, we were seeing that was going to be expanded from 8 weeks, and then it was 16, and now currently it's 28 weeks of time that you have to spend that money. We couldn't have done it without that loan. So the bill is for a second round of that funding for the continuation of CARES money, which is this emergency funding that, again, we in residential received money, as did other residential agencies. We also received it on the child care side. And I'll say this about child care. The footprint in Kentucky for child care, and Sonja, you weigh in, is going to be reduced. It already is. There are child care agencies in Kentucky that are not going to reopen. And that is a key prevention strategy for vulnerable kids in Kentucky. So that money on the child care side and that continuation of that money on the child care side, that CARES money, that emergency relief is critical. We wear two hats at St. Joe's, and to be just quite honest with you, at St. Joe's, a lot of our families are the families that drive the Frankfort Avenue corridor. We're not talking about those families. We're talking about families in critical zip codes throughout the Commonwealth. We know that there's disproportionality by race. We've seen that. And I'll say this, that it's a little bit of a segue. We have done such a good job, I think, as a community in our COVID response and keeping our kids safe, our residential kids and our foster care kids safe. The turmoil in our city and our state and our country right now that centers on racial injustice, we have yet to make the connection between what is happening now and what the future for our children is going to be if we don't change the course. Our kids in residential, and we've said this on Facebook and we've said this in print, and I know many of you all have, but they have to have two things to be successful. These are our most vulnerable kids in Kentucky. It's the kids don't have a connection to family, and they don't have a connection to our community. We have to have both of those things for those kids to have a future. So that said, things like childcare in vulnerable communities is going to be critical. But again, you know, for us too, we wear a second hat, and that's the work of residential and foster care. And those funds for us to be able to continue to deal with the expense line and continue to be with really what is just, I mean, it's the dog days of summer right now, and it's pretty miserable. And you watch our staff who are usually on 8 or 10 or 12-hour shifts and mask all day long in 95-degree heat. And it's the heavy is the crown for them right now, and it's misery to say the least. So those to me are the two big components: is the second round of PPP and that emergency funding that comes in the form of CARES money.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Unemployment reimbursement too. I forgot about that part.
And thankfully, as you say that, so all this federal legislation, it can get really jumbled, right? Like on which pieces we're asking for, what and where. And so we summarized some of that. When I say we, thank you, Michelle, you've been referenced several times today. The Children's Alliance here in Kentucky has put together a call to action for us. And so they did the hard work, the legwork of finding out what do we need to ask of our legislators and put that together in one single communication. Thank you to Children's Alliance for that. We're going to reference that today. But before we jump over there, I did want to, we have 3 people sitting here who have incredible experience advocating for individuals whose voices are not always heard. And so I wanted to put it out to the 3 of you. What is in terms of advocacy, why does this matter? Does it matter? We have voices coming at us all the time. We have social media coming at us all the time. Does it matter for me to contact my legislators? Does me personally, Rebekah, sitting in Shelby Park, contacting Mitch McConnell, does that mean anything? And I say that hoping there's a positive answer on the other side of that, but why does this kind of advocacy matter, and how does it make an impact for me individually to reach out?
Go ahead, Sonja.
Okay. I think one important component of this, and you know, I can't refer to this any more times than I do, but it's the education. As I mentioned, Kentucky is a mandatory reporting state, but if I go do a survey in the city of Louisville, what is the percentage of individuals that actually know, you know, that is a law here? So it kind of goes right along with advocacy. If you have never participated in it, you don't know what it is, then you tend not to be active. And not really realizing that the decisions that are made they will have an effect, you know, in your livelihood to some degree. So advocacy for me, the first layer is always that education. Why is it important to advocate? As we can see, and Grace brought this point up, we're kind of facing two things right now. 2020 has been very unusual, a very unusual year. But we have COVID-19, and then we also have, anti-racism, and we have a lot of protesting that's going on. And if you're trying to understand what advocacy is, turn on your TV and look at some of that protesting. That is a piece of legwork of advocacy. Getting out there, making sure that your voice is heard, making sure that you're being seen, but also demanding action to take place so that we can all have a better life. So advocacy, to me, it's very important to communicate. I feel like we're stronger in numbers. And so if we all have a commonality goal of saying, this is what we're looking for to make our state better, and it's coming from many different sources, many different areas of Kentucky, how can you not be heard by, someone, at that level, at that legislative level? And I think that's the first part of it is you got to be heard, but you got to be seen. And then you got to definitely define what are your actions that you're wanting to see change. And we know, based on a lot of things that are happening right now, there's a lot of laws that, systematic oppression. So those are things that we really have to really start looking at and peeling back those layers to really see how can we be a more effective, a more positive state for kids. Specifically, our kids are suffering. But I think Dale made the point, it's also generational. So we've been doing this, year after year, 20 years. And so, advocating is so important. And like I said, making sure that we have defined goals, defined actions, and really just keep knocking at the doors.
Yeah, thank you, Sonja, for all of that. I think you made a really impacting point there at the beginning when you were saying advocacy, in a way, it changes us, right? Like the more I'm educated on this, right, the better advocate I am. And that alone is value, right? Because the more information is, the better. And then also, I think you brought up a lot of points about the intersectionality here with advocacy. And we see that a lot within the social work field. It's not just one thing. So we're talking about a particular advocacy piece today, but hopefully we are all empowered moving forward to advocate in other ways that will affect our kids and our communities. So thank you so much for that. Grace, I think you were going to say something too.
Sonja said it so well, I think I'm going to pass.
Very good summary, exactly.
Well, you know what, persistence gets individuals and folks to take note. And that's why you're slowly seeing a change in our society today, because of persistence in the word is getting out. And so really what we're asking folks to do is to be the difference, right? We need lots of folks to stand up and be the difference. And so having that commonality of that message, no matter whether we're talking to legislators or senators or you know, our local folks, our mayors and so on. Kentucky kids are hurting, especially the least of these, as we say here at Sunrise, and it is our responsibility to stand up and everyone be the difference for these kids.
Rebekah, to your original question too about how to advocate in what ways, and I think, you know, there's kind of that multi-tiered approach. Absolutely, we have to start with our leaders, both in Kentucky and locally, and making sure that they understand exactly what we're asking of them. So our leaders have an opportunity right now on the COVID relief bill to again extend and expand that funding, and we have to advocate for that. But there are so many other avenues now at the tools in the toolbox, so to speak, that we have to advocate multiple ways. And of course, social media is a huge part of that, and how we interact with one another in relationships. Those are the things that change hearts and minds. And we've seen it over and over and over again when we're faced with a tough issue or an injustice or a discrimination of any kind, that relationships and connections are the things that change the course and the views of our community and our people. So I think that is equally as important. What we've tried to do at St. Joe's is to expand the network of our connections in the last, especially in these last 4 or 5 months. We had, I think, great connections that were much more formalized with the Children's Alliance and Cabinet Connections and Kentucky Youth Advocates and organizations, Center for Nonprofit Excellence, that we've taken advantage of every webinar they've had. But we've also looked at connections that we didn't have. Thrive Kentucky is one that we didn't have before, and they're doing a great webinar series that's really focused on these disproportionate outcomes that we're talking about. So looking for new connections and new relationships, I think, is critical. And I think we're gonna, again, it's not just for today, this is for the long haul. And as much and as many of those as new connections as you can find, that's what's, that's part of what's going to change hearts and minds.
Absolutely. Thank you, Grace. There's nothing to add here. I'm like, this is incredible information. I did want to go ahead and mention disproportionality has been brought up a couple of times. And so we don't have a ton of time to discuss this topic. It's one that is discussed extensively in our field right now. But we've brought up the topic of even disproportionality in our communities of color here in Kentucky within the child welfare system. So what I'm going to do is I'm dropping a link in the chat message that takes you to the 2019 county data book that has some really good information about that disproportionality. I'm also going to put this on Facebook Live as a comment. So if you would like to click through and see a little bit more information about that, I just want you to know this is a topic that comes up in our coalition often, and it's one that we want to address specifically, but it's a very multi-tiered issue that has a lot of complicating factors, which you'll note even in the data book, it talks about that. So I went ahead and dropped that link for you if you want to do a little research. It talks a little bit about, again, the disproportionate representation of children of color, and then on average, children of color are placed in more restrictive foster care placements than white young people, than their peers in similar situations. They tend to be placed in more restrictive settings. And so I did want to make sure I didn't want to skip out on the opportunity to provide you that resource. That's already in the comment section there. So before you close out, if you want to go ahead and click through to that, there's a little bit more information there. Thank you to KYA for providing that for us as well, Kentucky Youth Alliance advocates for us. So thank you so much to them. So I do want to move forward. So we're on time here. Thank you all for your conversation around advocacy. I think just the fact that you're showing up here today as a participant says that you care and you want to do something. So I think we've touched on two things. One is connections, like Grace was talking about. It's not just about writing a letter. Sometimes it's who's making the phone call. And so we have some board members of our organizations on here. We have some really well-connected people. The more connections you can make hand in hand with our executive directors and CEOs and the leadership of our organizations, the more impact we can make. So there is that side of it, your own personal connections and networks. How can you leverage those to help us have a louder voice in the community and with our legislators? So please consider that personally for yourself. But on the other side of it, we did want to, I know we've referenced it several times, that we are, I'm going to do a quick screen share here and show you a quick tool you can use today. I know you get a lot of emails, a lot of information coming at you. So we wanted to give you something you could click and do right here before you walk away. So first of all, once again, I'm dropping a second link into the chat sections of the Facebook page and the Zoom. And give me just 1 second while I do that, make sure I don't miss it here. And what this is going to take you to is, it's actually a page on the Boys and Girls Haven website right now, but the coalition is in the process. This is very quick turnaround for us, this webinar. We wanted to get this information out to you before the COVID-19 relief bill was fully drafted, because we want you to go ahead and have that advocacy opportunity. We're developing some other advocacy resources for you that, again, easy clicks, easy access from all of our different websites as a part of the coalition, and different resources you'll be able to access. But for now, we have this page we've developed. It's boysandgirlshaven.org/advocate. And if you go there, then it's going to give you a step-by-step process today to to advocate. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Always cross your fingers. You share the right screen here. Okay, so what you're seeing is the page that I just dropped the link for. Hopefully, if Grace or Dale or Sonja could give me a nod that you're seeing the screen share there. Okay. What we have here is, scroll up here, 3 things on this page. The first is how to find your city, state, and federal legislators. This will take you to an external website, commoncause.org, find your representative, but it's not just, it's all of your representatives. It's everything from your federal to your state and your local representatives. I went ahead as an example and typed in Boys and Girls Haven's address here in Louisville. And you can see it goes straight from the president to our senators and our state representative here in Louisville, our governor, down to our agricultural commissioner. It's got all the information here. And I do want to show you as well that when you click through here on this website, it will also show you all of the available contact information for that individual. Some of these will have email addresses, especially our local leaders here. You'll see email addresses listed for those. So this is just a great resource for you that summarizes. There's a few different websites you can find, but this was one that was easy to navigate, so we went ahead and provided it for you. If you have another way, please feel free to utilize that. I'd recommend that if any of these links work for you, go ahead and save them to your desktop so we can advocate every day. You can find something to advocate for. But the second spot here is steps to contact your federal legislators. This is important right now because of the advocacy we're asking you to do in this step. And we're using an external site for that as well for you to make it really easy. You don't have to track down email addresses or figure anything out. You just go to democracy.io, type in your contact information here, your address, and it will take you to a spot where you can actually copy and paste a message in or type your own message. We wanted to give you a really easy way to do that. It's a nonpartisan website. They don't give you suggestions of what to say. We, however, are giving you a suggestion what to say. And that is the third section down here where it says July COVID-19 action alert. This is very immediate. If you can do this today, all the better. And then follow up afterwards. Follow up, follow up, follow up. This content was developed once again by children. They summarize some information for us. It has very clear action steps. Once again, trying to memorize all this can be tough, but the basic information is here for you. If you're uncomfortable with any of these, feel free to take them out, do some research yourself for it. We're happy to have you do that. All you have to do is copy the text here and then copy that over to the democracy.io contact page. And you can, when you hit that submit button, it goes straight to your legislators, exactly where it's supposed to go. So we wanted to go ahead and show you a resource for yourself. Some of you are already advocates and you were just looking for messaging and you already know who you want to contact and how. Here's some messaging for you that's summarizing what we're asking for here in Kentucky. Again, nonpartisan ask here. This is just an immediate, absolute need for our kids in a crisis situation. So once again, boysandgirlshaven.org/advocate. If you can't remember the /advocate, just go to boysandgirlshaven.org. It has COVID-19 advocate button. So that's just a really quick way for you to do that. If you have other words you want to add in, it also gives you the opportunity to that. You can reword and say what you want to say to your legislators. You have that opportunity, but this is just a really simple way to contact your federal legislators and get that through. Once again, if you would like a phone number or an email address, we gave you that additional resource to go over, and we encourage you any way you can to reach out right now as they're drafting this bill, and make sure that you hear our voices here in Kentucky loud and clear. We care about our kids and we care about our families, and we want you to show that by supporting us in a really, really challenging time in terms of fiscal landscape for our nonprofits and for all of our children in the state system here in Kentucky. 10,000 kids, 10,000 Kentucky children right now in foster care need our voices. So that's where things sit. If you have additional questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll do our best to follow up with them afterwards. You're also welcome to If you're on Facebook, you can send Boys and Girls Haven or St. Joe's or Echo or Sunrise a private message if you have a question for any of us. We're happy to help, and please go like their pages if you haven't already. We're all partners with each other. Children's Alliance, we've given them a lot of shout outs today. Go look them up. They provide a lot of really good advocacy information. Kentucky Youth Advocates as well, and the Face It Initiative, Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky. We've thrown out a lot of really great partners that are doing really good work around the state. So please, we love to share. Go, if you're a Boys and Girls Haven follower on Facebook, make sure you look up our sister agencies and you can get a big picture of what's actually happening around the state and all the work that's being done. Grace and Dale and Sonja, thank you again so much for this. Do you have any parting words, any last things you'd like to share?
I just appreciate the opportunity and appreciate all of you all that stuck with us for an hour. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, I kind of ditto what Grace has said. Thank you for this opportunity and this platform. I think, the more that we talk about it, the more that we come together as an alliance, as allies, as friends, and really focus on the safety of our kids, I truly believe that we can make a difference here in the state of Kentucky. So thank you.
And I truly appreciate the hard work that all of our sister organizations are doing together. And thank you for being on the front lines. It means a lot. We are changing lives. I know it's tough work, but we don't give ourselves enough credit. Rebekah, you've done a wonderful job today putting this together, so thank you.
Thank you. All right. One last note, if you found this information helpful and you would like to share it with your networks, once again, it's shareable on Facebook, and we also are going to be uploading it to YouTube pages. So please keep an eye on the sister agencies that we've mentioned for more information, and you're welcome to share those YouTube links. Those are easy to email out, as well as our Facebook page. So thank you guys so much, and hope all of you have a really great day.